What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to Talkin BS. I am your host, as always, Stephen Zamora. If you can, please follow me on Twitter at ZamoraBSB. And today I'm bringing you another off-season preview. This time we are doing the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, Cleveland is one of the most confusing teams I have done so far. Okay, let's talk about it. We had Donovan Mitchell come out and say after the season that he didn't jive with some of the immaturity going on in the locker room. We had Darius Garland apparently tell Shams and Jason Lloyd that he would like to play somewhere else if Donovan Mitchell was retained. We had Marcus Morris come out after the season and basically say that Jarrett Allen isn't tough enough and that if he had a pierced rib, that he would have played through it. Just a whole lot of drama. And, at the end of the day, a lot of the guys just don't really mesh well, don't really fit together, that great. You got really small guards in the backcourt. You got two front court giant guys that don't shoot very well. Like I said, there's a ton to figure out with this team and why I had some trouble figuring everything out for them. But I think we finally got through it and find a team that we can be really excited about heading into next season. So if you are a subscriber, you know how this goes. But if you are new here, this is how we're going to break this show down. First, we're going to cover the weaknesses that the Cavs have to improve on. We're going to go over the tools you have to get better. We're going to bring up a list of things the front office must address. Then we're going to get into the draft. We're going to look at some trade options for you. And then we're going to hit free agency, see if we can bring in any free agents to help this team out. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have a nice 10-man rotation that we can be really excited about heading into the 24-25 season. So I'm trying to get every team done just like this before the draft in June. So if you like this kind of content, like and subscribe to the channel. It'll really help me out. And without further ado, let's get into it. The Cleveland Cavaliers. So first we got to look at some statistical weaknesses that the Cavs need to address before they go any further. You were 23rd in points per game. You were 7th in points allowed per game, 23rd in rebounding, 25th in field goal attempts per game, 21st in blocks per game, 27th in fouls per game, 23rd in free throw percentage, and 27th in fourth quarter points. We just need to make this team a little bit more cohesive, in my opinion. But there are some ways to make that happen. We have the 20th overall pick in the NBA draft. No picks in the second round. Darius Garland, Jarrett Allen, Karis LeVert, and George Niang, all tradable contracts. They have about $150 million in contracts on the books for 24-25, well below the luxury tax line. 2025, 2027, and 2029 firsts are owed to Utah. 2026 and 2028, Utah can swap with Cleveland, and they own their own 2030 pick. So as far as draft picks, you already swapped a ton of picks with Utah, so Utah basically owns your draft rights for the next 5 years. So we're not really going to be able to use a lot of those draft picks to improve the team here. But you do have some really good contracts and you have some really good young players that are tradable. But before we go into that, let's see what the front office must address before we go further. So we need to figure out who this team is being built around, okay? At the end of the day, that goes hand in hand with the figure out the puzzle thing, right? We need to figure out where this team is heading. We need to find out, first and foremost, what Donovan Mitchell is doing. Because if he's leaving, then all this could be just kaputs, right? All this stuff can just be thrown away. In my opinion, I think he'll be back. So he is eligible for a 4-year extension at around $200 million. And according to Dan Gilbert, he has heard very good things from Donovan Mitchell about wanting to return to the team. We've been talking to him for sure for the last couple of years about extending this contract. We think he will extend. I think if you listen to him talk, he loves the city. He loves the situation in Cleveland because our players are very young and we're just kind of putting the core together that he's clearly the biggest part of. If that's the case, we're just going to go ahead and go with the notion that he is going to re-sign. I don't know if he's going to sign the extension right away, but I don't know. I have a hunch that he's going to sign back with Cleveland. But, it's really 50-50 at this point. And since we don't really know where that's going to go, I'm just going to go with the notion that he is going to re-sign with the team and we're going to go from there. So looking ahead to the draft, you guys have the 20th overall pick in the first round. So there are some good options there. So on your left is going to be a big board provided by CBS. On the right is a big board provided by Tankathon. And the middle one is provided by The Ringer. And if you'll notice, a lot of the comps are for like really high level role players. So the top end of this draft doesn't have a huge superstar. This is why a lot of guys and scouts and stuff are saying that this is a weaker draft. It's not necessarily the depth of this draft. The draft is actually pretty deep. But what it is not super top heavy. There's not a Victor Wembanyama. There's not an Anthony Edwards or anything like that. But what there is a lot of really good role player guys. And of course, every draft is going to end up with some superstars, right? Even Giannis came out of one of the weakest drafts in memorable history. So there are chances to get stars here. I think you could really use another wing. You could use some more wing depth. And I think I might have the perfect idea in mind. And with that 20th overall pick, we're going to go ahead and draft Bobby Klintman from the NBL. So Klintman is an interesting player. He just got done playing a year professionally in Australia, but he did play a year of college as well. In college, he played around 20 minutes a game. He averaged, I think, like 5 or 6 points a game. But by the end of the season, he really started popping off of the tape, and scouts really started to like him a lot. He did enter into the 2023 NBA draft, but then didn't show up to the combine or anything and ended up withdrawing from the draft with a chance to, make more of an impression in 2024 after a year of growth. And, considering this class was a little weaker, he thought it would be a better idea to make himself eligible for this one. What's really nice about him is like every game he got better. So by the end of the year was his strongest games. His last 2 games, he played really well. He's kind of on a linear, exponential path towards his growth. He's got a lot of size and athleticism. He has the tool. He's 6'10", 212. Really big guy. He has some good natural basketball instincts. He moves like a basketball player, right? So a ton of defensive upside, very long kid, can handle the ball pretty well for being so tall. He's a pretty good passer for as tall as he is. He's pretty deadly in transition. That's probably my favorite part about his game is in transition. He's very, very good. And he's not a bad shooter. Usually guys that are like this and have this kind of mold and stuff, they're not really the best shooters a lot of the time. He shot 37% from 3. And it was pretty consistent. I think even in his year in college, he shot like 35% from 3. So he's getting a little bit better every year. I think he's just going to keep getting better and better. He is a little raw. He's, on the thinner side. His shot is inconsistent, right? These are all things I believe that can be coached up. But some stuff like he's not super bouncy. Like he's not a super, super like poppy vertical athlete, and he doesn't have like a ton of bursts, right? He's not explosive. So like he measures really well. He jumps high, stuff like that. But there's also a thing of like, jumping high, but also jumping high fast, right? So he's just like not explosive. So he is athletic. He could get up there. He's like a good shot blocker, stuff like that. But he's just not explosive, if you know what I'm saying. Like it's kind of a little niche thing I noticed watching him. And like I said, he's really raw. So he might have like one of the lower floors in the draft. I've seen a lot of people comp him to Nicholas Batum, and I think that's a really good comp for him. I think Klintman can grow into the type of defensive threat that Nicholas Batum did turn into. But I also could see him turning into more of a Kyle Kuzma type, where, he never really does develop like great defensive instincts or anything like that, because that is kind of more of a natural thing. But he will, be a good spot up shooter and help the offense a ton. So now let's talk about some trade options. This team is going to be pretty close to the luxury tax. I'm going to try to move George Niang here. So we're going to send George Niang to Orlando in exchange for the 47th pick in the 2024 draft. And in return, we're going to send them a 2025 second round pick via Milwaukee and a 2027 pick via Denver. Now, the reason that Orlando does this is Orlando is desperate for shooting. So he's a pretty good shooter. He's got size. He can play the 3 or 4. So he's not a total just like take on this contract and eat cap space for us. He can be pretty useful for Orlando just for the fact that they are taking on a bigger contract. We are going to send them 2 second-round picks as compensation for that. Niang's contract is only for 2 years, so they are getting a second even for after the year that he's going to be gone. And in return, Cleveland, you get a 47th overall pick. You get another young guy to bring in the pipeline. And, rookies, they're going to be more valuable than ever, right? Bringing in guys who are on cheap, good contracts, and if you develop them into actual NBA players, it's more of an incentive to get them guys up to speed and make them NBA ready. But that's not all we're going to do. Okay, we're going to do another trade here. Too much tension in the backcourt between Garland and Donovan Mitchell now. I just feel like they just might need a separation. At the end of the day, Donovan Mitchell is the much better player. I love Garland. I think he's going to be a really good player. But as of right now, Donovan Mitchell is the better player. If you can figure out that he is going to commit to Cleveland, then that is your guard. Then I'm okay with trading Garland. And in this scenario, I think it's a good return. Cleveland would receive Brandon Ingram, and New Orleans would receive Darius Garland. So the reason New Orleans does this, Brandon Ingram is probably going to be leaving in a year from New Orleans anyway. New Orleans needs a real point guard to grow with Zion. Now you got two guys who are around 20, 23, 24, 25 years old, and they can really grow together and build some chemistry up together, right? He can be your franchise point guard in New Orleans for a long time. So you're giving up on Garland and you're bringing in Brandon Ingram. And Ingram's a little bit older, right? But he's going to be more around the age of Donovan Mitchell. He's going to be, I guess, in the maturity range of Donovan Mitchell. And this opens up Donovan Mitchell to be more of an on-ball guy. He doesn't have to share the ball as much as he did with Darius Garland. So Brandon Ingram is a very good ball handler as well. He's going to be a playmaker. He's going to be able to handle the ball as well. But he's not a point guard, right? He's more of a secondary creator, a guy who can be more of a release valve on offense for you. So if Donovan Mitchell is like in a funk or, teams are throwing doubles at him all game or, stuff like that, Brandon Ingram's a great, great release valve. He could be one of the best number twos in the entire league. I think that's just a perfect pairing right there. And an even better fit next to Mobley, in my opinion. Like Mobley can hold down the defense. You still got Jarrett Allen. In this scenario, I could have flipped Jarrett Allen or, something like that to try to break up the bigs, but I'm going to keep them because Mobley has shown a propensity to start being able to shoot. I think he shot 37% from three last year. So, it's low volume, but it's getting there. He's starting to become a better shooter. So now you have Donovan Mitchell, Brandon Ingram, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen. I think those four just fit a whole lot better. So now that we got a new core in place, let's take a look at free agency and see how we can fit some new pieces around on the margin. So a big priority going into free agency is going to be re-signing Isaac Okoro, who's going to be a restricted free agent. Probably letting go of Tristan Thompson, Damian Jones, and Marcus Morris Sr. just because they're a little bit older. And I personally feel we could find some better backup big men than that, especially since Marcus Morris was kind of, bashing Jarrett Allen once he was off the team. But if that's the case, we're going to be at around $160 to $165 million at this point, leaving us about $5 to $10 million to spend in free agency. So with that said, we got a few holes to fill. Let's look at some guards first. Markelle Fultz, Dennis Smith, Spencer Dinwiddie, Monte Morris, Chris Dunn, Aaron Holiday. So in my opinion, I feel like Markelle Fultz might just be a little too expensive, especially if you only have like a $5 million, space there to sign players. I think he might be able to get more than that. Dennis Smith, I think, would be a great option here. That's probably my number one focus going into free agency. Spencer Dinwiddie is another guy. He's an older player, but he brings a lot of stuff that I do like and could fit and mesh well with this team. Monte Morris, if you want more of a pure point guard who's going to set things up, he's a very good offensive player, but he's a pretty bad defensive player. Chris Dunn, the exact opposite. Not a great offensive player, but a very good defender. Aaron Holiday, he had a very successful year in Houston last year, considering that he went in not even knowing if he was really going to be staying on the team and ended up becoming a rotation player. So that's another option. We got Royce O'Neal, Furkan Korkmaz, Derrick Jones Jr., Najee Marshall, Simone Fontecchio. So there were reports, because Royce O'Neal played with Donovan Mitchell back in Utah, that might be an interesting pairing. In my opinion, I like Dean Wade. I think he's a really good player. I think we're going to bring Okoro back, and obviously LeVert is still on the team. So I don't know if there's a ton of minutes on the wing there. So let's look at some big men. We got Jalen Smith, Dario Saric, Drew Eubanks, Mason Plumlee, and Luke Cornett. So I think if you could afford Jalen Smith, that would be an awesome option. He shot nearly 40% from three. You guys need a stretch big option out there, and he's a big guy. He's like 7 feet tall almost. So I think that would be a really, really good option. If you could get him on a bargain bin contract, I think that's who you should offer that $5 million to. Unfortunately, I don't think he'll be able to do it. I think he'll be able to command some more money than that. So then Dario Saric, I think that's perfect. I think he's willing to take a contract that you would be willing to offer him, and I think he would be a really good fit here. So I think the most realistic options here are going into getting Dennis Smith Jr. and signing Dario Saric. With that $5 to $10 million, that should be doable, and those are both two guys I think would fit really well into this culture. So now, let's take a look at Cleveland's final rotation. We got Donovan Mitchell at point, backed up by Dennis Smith. We got Max Strus, backed up by Karis LeVert. Brandon Ingram, backed up by Isaac Okoro. Evan Mobley, backed up by Dean Wade. And Jarrett Allen, backed up by Dario Saric. We have Bobby Klintman, the 47th overall pick, Sam Merrill, Ty Jerome, and Craig Porter Jr. on the deep bench. First things first, right? We're moving Donovan Mitchell to the point guard full time. I know there's a lot of people who are skeptical if that would really work because Donovan Mitchell isn't necessarily like a full-time point guard all the time. But you also have Dennis Smith in there. So if you really need to, you could play him more off of the ball at certain points. I think Dennis Smith is a good enough point guard that you can play Donovan Mitchell off the ball a pretty substantial amount of the time. And at the end of the day, Donovan Mitchell wants the ball in his hands, and he's really good with it in his hands. So let him be the point. This also improved your backcourt size. Now you got Strus as your 2 because you had him as a 3 guarding threes, and he was one of the smallest threes. So now he can move back to his more natural position at the 2 and guard some more guys that are his size. Donovan Mitchell, where he's a deficient size at the 2 guard, is now one of the bigger point guards. And then you bring in Brandon Ingram. He's almost 7 feet tall. You got Evan Mobley, he's a 7-footer, Jarrett Allen. So you're more with the times, right? Your team gets a whole lot bigger by moving Garland for Ingram and then shifting everybody to a more appropriate like size position. Between Strus, Ingram, and Mobley, and then all those backups, like there's not an answer you don't have for any type of player. And then, of course, you got Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley could play the 5. There are going to be times where you're going to have to move Evan Mobley to the 5. And it's good to get that experiment in there and just see, get as many reps in there as the 5 as possible. And then on top of that, Mobley can play with Wade. Mobley can play with Sarge. Sarge could play with Allen. All these guys are switchable and playable at the 4 or the 5 spot. So, yeah, I think that's a really good rotation. I think you got a little bit of everything there. So now you got a really good offense to match that really good defense that you had last year. You bring in a guy who's a very capable ISO scorer in place of a more pure point guard, but then you also go out and get you some backups that really fill in the spots that you needed last year. You have a ton of length already on this team, so now it was more just about supplementing that with team playmaking as a whole, just filling in the gaps offensively is really what this team does. But if you disagree with anything I did here, if you are totally against trading Garland, I understand, right? He's 24 years old. Let me know down in the comments, how would you handle that situation? I've been telling you, I thought about this for days, and I really could not think of a better way to do this. I just feel like that backcourt needs to be broken up. And if you can get a good return for Brandon Ingram, all the better, right? But if you disagree with anything else, let me know. I love the discourse. I want to hear your guys' opinions. That's what I do this for. I love talking hoops all day. And if you do like this content and you did like this video, first of all, thank you so much for making it all the way through. And I appreciate you so, so much from the bottom of my heart. To my subscribers, I love you guys. Y'all are amazing. Please remember, hit that like and subscribe button before you go. Love y'all, man. Peace out. Thank you.